They could not therefore all meet in one place for the stated observance of the Sabbath and public religious service, nor was it necessary, having 12 apostles among them. A general meeting, however, was called in chapter 6, verse 2, and the business laid before them, verses 3 and 4. To constitute this meeting, it was not requisite that all should attend. A number of both classes, Grecians and Hebrews, or from each congregation, by that time probably 7, might be sufficient, and would form a general convocation. The choice mentioned in verse 5 might be made in the different congregations, and the names given in to the apostles at another meeting, when the persons were presented for ordination in verse 6. Matters being thus comfortably settled, new additions were made to the number of disciples in verse 7. The second instance is recorded in Acts chapter 15, and here a footnote. Even chapter 14, verse 27 might have been adduced as an instance. Paul and Barnabas, when they returned to Antioch, whence they had been recommended to the grace of God for the work which they fulfilled, gathered the church together and rehearsed all that God had done with them, and how he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. There was no common occasion, and an extraordinary meeting was held. For a summary of the clear and convincing evidence that the church at Antioch must have consisted of a plurality of congregations, see Vindication by Whitlock, page 9 and 10. The passages appealed to are Acts 11, verses 20, 21, 24, 26, and 30, as well as Acts 13, verse 1. The account of the success of Paul and Barnabas was probably given in at a general meeting to those by whom they had been missioned and commended to the grace of God. This meeting was publicly advertised, and all of the people who chose might attend, and hearing might rejoice for the consolation. Another similar meeting is mentioned in Acts 15, verse 30, only in this, as relating to their own cause, the multitude were more immediately concerned. They were accordingly called together, and to them the decrees of the apostles and elders were read. It is not necessary to suppose that all attended, but those who did would soon spread abroad the happy issue to which matters had been brought. It is observable that the usual phrase in describing these general meetings is, "the multitude were gathered together," denoting a large and indiscriminate assembly. The apostles and elders came together to decide in a certain cause, and the multitude is said to have attended. Verse 12. This multitude is styled the whole church. Who, though they took no part in the discussion, according to what is stated in verse 12, yet by their silence, or perhaps some testimony of acquiescence, showed their consent to what was done. Besides the official men who came together to consider the cause, there were others present who, being endowed with supernatural gifts, might have spoken had anything been revealed to them, but all acquiesced in the sentence of James. And here a footnote. Though the extraordinary spiritual gifts which obtained in the first age might authorize any who possessed them to preach, yet even in that age the line of distinction seems to have been clearly marked in the subject of government, between those who were merely qualified by such gifts for preaching or exhorting, and those who were regularly ordained office-bearers in the church. Compare 1 Corinthians 14, verses 29 through 32, with Acts 4, verse 31, and mark the account in Acts 16, verse 4. Probably an opportunity was given these brethren of speaking if they chose, and their not differing or dissenting from the apostles and elders formed an additional proof that the sentence was the mind of the Spirit. It was indeed in that controversy a great object gained, to have the acquiescence of the Jewish converts, as the decision affected their communion with the Gentiles. It was the decision of a practical cause, and one that bare on the law of Moses, in regard to which the most prudential plans of procedure behooved to be followed. Though, therefore, the multitude were not called together, as in the former instance, since this in the present case would have recognized them as judges, yet their attendance was of importance. The meeting accordingly was public. An opportunity was given to all who could attend. The concourse was great, and the apostles and elders, pleased to find that in this delicate cause their decision met with general approbation, notified this to the Christians at Antioch as a circumstance that ought to have its own weight in conciliating brotherly love. The third instance to which we refer is mentioned in Acts 21. Paul, the minister of the Gentiles, on his arrival at Jerusalem, met with the apostles and elders in verses 17 and 18. They informed him that so soon as it was known he was come, the multitude would assemble. Verse 22. Reports had been circulated of his teaching the Jews, which were among the Gentiles, to forsake Moses and not circumcise their children. It was a critical case. The converts at Jerusalem were yet weak in conscience and unable to bear much. It would not be possible to prevent the multitude from attending those meetings of James and the elders in which Paul might be present, perhaps from demanding some satisfaction as to the reports they had heard. The next meeting the brethren suspected behooved to be public, and they alleged it would be a pity to give any offense. What is it, therefore? The multitude must needs come together. Here James supposes the practicability of general meetings, but in the very address he made to Paul, he cuts off every surmise that the whole body of Christians at Jerusalem could assemble even on such occasions, and much less surely could they meet together for stated worship in one place. Thou seest, brother, how many myriads, myriae, thousands at least, 10,000s according to the force of the word, allowing it to be hyperbole, vast multitudes, of Jews there are which believe, and they are all zealous of the law. What is it, therefore? The multitude. He does not say the whole. It had been impossible, must needs come together. Though he had said the whole, common sense would have limited the expression to a large proportion, a very general concourse, as in Luke 1 verse 10 and Luke 8 verse 37. Recollect now the points which seem to be established. What may be styled a general meeting of the Christians at Corinth for observing the supper was practicable. The phrase, they came together into one place, unless it be a pleonasm, unseasonable and a serious admonition, where every expression ought to bear on the case, must denote a meeting of this kind, and according to verse 18, a church meeting for public worship, not the attendance of spectators at a court, as in some of the instances adduced. Such meetings could be only occasional, as the numbers did not permit them to meet in one place for stated worship, on which all were bound to attend every Lord's Day, and for which separate assemblies afforded a convenient opportunity to all. We conclude, therefore, that the members of different congregations, as many as could, joined together at certain times in the ordinance of the supper, to testify their unity in the profession of Christ, and that for this end the ordinance was dispensed now at one place of meeting, now at another, in routine, sometimes in Corinth itself, then at Centria, the port town, where there was confessedly a church, however small, and the members of which seem to be included among the Corinthians, to whom the epistle is addressed. Number 2. The practice in the first ages after the days of the apostles ought to be the next subject of review. It would be tedious, however, to detail and comment on the various accounts of ancient usage in regard to the supper. It is by no means necessary we should. From these accounts, we can only gather that uniformity of practice did not obtain even in the age that succeeded the apostolic, and that afterwards different regulations were made by councils and bishops with a view to uniformity, but not always the best.